14 years old. I can't help.
Okay, we're ready to start the final panel of the conference before the closing remarks. And if you've come specifically for this panel, it'd be great if you also stay for the closing remarks by Chip Blake, who's a great person to hear speak. So this is a panel of writers who represent the Honors College as well as their individual departments. Hope, Sarah, Miguel, and Will. And they're each going to introduce themselves, give you a little bit more information, and then read for you.
So are we going to all introduce ourselves and then read? Or like
Introduce yourself and read.
And read?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm Hope Lenamon. I'm a senior journalism major with a double minor in electronic media communications and women's and gender studies. I typically write about women's issues or LGBTQ plus issues. I fully intended on writing a more nature-y piece for this conference, but then I got offered an internship out in LA, so I've been dealing with getting housing and stuff together for that. So I'm just gonna read an old piece I have from Professor Caswell's class, but it deals a little bit more with human nature than nature, so I hope y'all still enjoy it. But it's titled Paramount, a Safe Space. From my seat in the balcony of the Paramount Theater in Austin, I survey the crowd surrounding me. At a quick glance, this may look like any other concert crowd. However, in the middle of Texas, this is not your typical crowd. There is a lesbian couple 2 rows down, openly kissing each other. Gay men walk to their seats hand in hand. The men and women's bathroom signs have papers taped over them reading gender neutral, a staple at this band's shows. A feeling of safety and comfort fills the sold-out 1,200-seat theater. I check the time on my phone, 7:50. In 10 minutes, Tegan and Sarah, an indie pop band from Canada, will take the stage to perform an acoustic set of an album released 10 years ago. I grew up in the kind of small Texas town where everyone was straight, or at least pretended to be so. I discovered the music of Tegan and Sarah in high school during the peak years of my own struggle to find out my own sexuality. They were both openly gay women themselves, and their albums served as my go-to place for advice, comfort, and reassurance that I was not alone. I listened to every song they had ever released on repeat. Then, as they began to put out new albums, I bought and listened to those, becoming a fan for life. In the safety of the Paramount filled with LGBTQ people and allies, it is easy to forget the troubles that face the community and the rest of the world. Throughout history, members of the community have been denied basic human rights. Recently, strides have been made to improve equality for the LGBTQ community, like the nationwide passing of marriage equality or the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. However, life is not all rainbows and glitter and unicorns. 2016 through 2018 have been the era of Trump and making America great again. The fine line between hate speech and free speech has been continuously called into question. NBC News reported that hate crimes in the 9 metropolitan U.S. areas rose by more than 20% during 2016, with most of this increase being attributed to inflamed passions during the recent presidential campaign. The lights of the Paramount go down. Tegan and Sarah run onto stage. 2 men walk on stage behind them and take their places behind a keyboard and guitar. Tegan and Sarah also have their own selection of guitars and keyboard on stage. The rest of the stage is as simple as the acoustic setup. Panels of artwork from the original album hang down from the ceiling, light accentuating each one. After a few minutes of saying hello to the crowd, they start in on the first song of the night. The song, I Was Married, examines a previous relationship of Sarah's and discusses how the relationship was seen as wrong because it was made up of 2 women. The song goes, now we look up in to the eyes of bullies breaking backs. They seem so very tough. They seem so very scared of us. I look into the mirror for evil that just does not exist. I don't see what they see. According to the Human Rights Campaign, 6,121 hate crimes against the LGBTQ community were reported to the FBI in 2016. Personally, I see hate directed towards the community on a near daily basis. Walking around my college campus, it is not uncommon to hear someone use fag or that's so gay to speak negatively of someone or something. Out around town, I have been stared at for holding my girlfriend's hand in a way a straight couple never would be. I see trans individuals face attack after attack from the current administration through bathroom and military service bans. And while all these attacks are disturbing, it is even more terrifying to know these less physical acts of hate can explode into much more deadly ones. Take, for instance, the Pulse nightclub shooting. On June 12, 2016, a shooter entered the gay nightclub and opened fire, killing 49 people and injuring 58 others. I remember waking up to this news on my Twitter feed feeling defeated. Nearly a year to the day after marriage equality was deemed a constitutional right by the Supreme Court, the LGBTQ community was given a somber reminder of where they stood in the world. But just as the LGBT community has done throughout history, we do not let these hate-filled times get us down. We regroup, we heal. We remind one another that this community is all about love, regardless of how much hate tries to penetrate it. So sitting in the balcony of the Paramount as Tegan and Sarah sing song after song, I can breathe a sigh of relief. I'm among my people in a safe space away from the hate of the outside world. For 2 hours, I'm somewhere I will not be judged for looking over at my girlfriend, kissing her in excitement. When the lights come on and it's time for us to leave, I will once again step into the uncertainty being LGBTQ and the greater world brings. However, I will proudly carry the feeling of safety and community I felt within the walls of the Paramount with me. Hopefully, one day the world can be our concert.
Hi, I'm Sarah Huerta. I'm a second-year English major. My concentration is in creative writing. I mainly write poetry, sometimes creative nonfiction for Caswell's class. So I have some poems to read. The first one is about a cricket, and it's called Cricket. Crawling through the thicket, a creeping black cricket, nearly invisible to human eyes, she begins to rise, rise, rise. Sitting on a stalk, high to meet the moon, the insect would surely be there soon, floating, hovering in her light all throughout the summer night. An odd dance with no pause, but for what cause? The next two I have to do with bipolar disorder, and I kind of like to bring in nature to talk about it because I feel like there's a lot of intricacies to both of those things, like both of those themes, and poetry is like a great way to like explore those themes. This one's called Recurring. A window shattered. A gust of wind tore through the house, shaking the walls, knocking journals and books off shelves, ripping photographs off walls, spilling yesterday's coffee and serenity. She, as always, slept through the midnight storm, the rain's dissipation as sudden as its vicious onset. No other homes appeared affected, aside from shards of debris littering lawns. Glass sparkled among the poems, the pages of notes, the smiling faces. The chirping of birds awakened the neighborhood. She wandered around the room, as if seeing it for the first time, picked up a photo, and wondered if today's restoration would be as lengthy as the last. A hummingbird fluttered around the glassless frame, and the unfiltered sunlight shone through. The next one, I took the title from a line in Sylvia Plath's poem, Daddy. She also had bipolar disorder, so I felt like it was fitting. It's called, I Have Had to Kill You. Unnoticeable at first, it begins to worm its way to your brain, a simple mood disorder, euphoria and a disconnect feud with their counterparts, symptoms a swarm, apathy and fatigue, the illness taking form. Where did it come from? They'll say it's in your blood, another thing to blame on your father. It's a flood. There isn't enough time in between to warm yourself up to it. But now, from a hospital room, you discover you've swallowed too many pills, yet somehow not enough. Mom pretends it isn't true, but you are just as much him as you are her. Little by little, you learn to cope without having to kill. You live with it. You live with you. I'm from Dallas originally, and this one is about the lovely weather in Lubbock that I'm not that used to yet. It's called April in West Texas. Pink skies accompany the rising sun, its warmth offsetting a cool breeze, new lavender upsetting the smell of cattle, red tulips comprising the landscape, their presence surprising expanses of dead grass. We're indebting ourselves to Rhea, annually abetting Persephone's uprising. But too often the wind is merciless, turning the sky a light brown, dust filling mouths, blurring vision. The birds are screeching. Creation is an artifice. Did he truly architecture this town and its collection of fragments with precision? And my last one, I wasn't planning on reading, but Dr. Poach kind of convinced me to, so I had to find it and kind of rewrite it during lunch today. And it's like an abecedarian, so each word starts with like the next letter of the alphabet. I don't know if I explained that very well, but it's called Bible Belt. Agnostic, barely Christian, Dante's evening, faint ghost, he's imitating Jesus. Knees lowering, making night overtly prayerful. Quiet recitation, somber theology, undermined, visibly wasted. Xenos, your zodiac. That's all. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Miguel Vega. I am a chemical engineering major. I'm a senior, and I've never done this before, so I'm going to read to you a nonfiction travel piece titled Sculpture. As I walk with my 7 friends through Polodoro Canyon toward the lighthouse formation at the end of the trail, our shadows swam over the brick red earth. Out of the women's shadows, there was one that lacked the natural bobbing of the hair caused by the constant pounding of the feet during a walk. This shadow belonged to Ranim. Her name from Arabic means sweet singing voice. She is a practicing Muslim and she wore a hijab. Polodoro, the second largest canyon in the U.S., located about 20 miles southeast of Amarillo, marks the eastern boundary of the Llano Estacado, the Stake Plain. The region is called the Caprock Escarpment due to the sudden change from the Caprock High Plains to the low, uneven terrain of the canyon floor. The first Europeans to visit Polodoro were the men of the Coronado expedition, around 1541. The expedition was led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, and the mission was to find the 7 cities of gold. In his thirst for riches, Coronado led the expedition from the midwestern coast of Mexico up to southern Kansas. After passing near the Grand Canyon, Coronado followed a rumor from a native prisoner, El Turco, about Quibira, a legendary city that flowed with gold and silver. El Turco lied about the city and was garroted by the Spaniards, but in his search, Coronado came across Polodoro Canyon. After our snack break beneath the shade of juniper and mesquite trees, we climbed the loose dirt and small boulders. Ranim required assistance up the 30% incline that was littered with small pebbles and low-lying branches. I took Ranim's hand and looked at her black hijab. It was as perfectly shaped, sculpted by her hands earlier that morning. A year before this hike, I became friends with a few men from the Middle East who were also students at my university. As a native Spanish speaker, the similarities between the Arabic and Spanish language brought us together. I became interested in their culture and customs. I found that they were a caring and loving people, as opposed to the westernized view posed in the media. Each of them had sisters, but we never talked about them. After a year of friendship, I understood these men, but I did not know much about Muslim women. Ranim is the sister of one of my friends. About 3 months ago, she immigrated from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to Lubbock, Texas. Her face is round and fair, with a light indication of freckles at the bridge of her nose. Her eyes are a deep dark brown, and her black brow is the only indication of the color of her hair. I have never seen her hair, and I probably never will. As I helped Ranim climb, my tense hand relaxed and figured out the best contortion to serve as an anchor point. Although she was hesitant, she relied on me more as the path cleared away from the mesquites and the wind picked up. The bright vermilion walls of the base of the lighthouse were becoming visible. My hair flapped violently with the wind, yet her hijab was as permanent as time itself. I once asked Ranim's brother why she wore her hijab, even though she was now living in the U.S. Was he forcing her to wear it, for he was the patriarch in their household? He told me that it was her choice. I did not fully understand this choice. Her other Muslim girlfriends had removed their hijabs and started to style their rich black hair when they came to America. I should have asked her myself, but I could never get over the feeling of asking about something so intimate. Maybe it would have been okay to ask here in this barren landscape with wind strong enough to carve a canyon? Probably not. As we climbed the trail to the lighthouse, the large junipers looked like small shrubbery far below. I still held Ranim's hand at every large step over the rocks, We slowed our pace, for the steep slope was becoming exhausting. The lighthouse was fully visible and becoming larger as we continued to climb. In the Quran, women are instructed to be veiled. The scripture says that women need to cover their bosom for modesty. It is a sin to harass women or men, so women should cover themselves. After reaching puberty, some women wear hijabs to show their devotion to God. Some women wear them to express their Muslim identity or culture. Some women who are Muslim and choose not to wear the hijab are mostly found in the Western world. Despite the choice, the controversy is whether the hijab or any type of veiling of women is a patriarchal practice that allows men greater social control. Some men say that the veil is what keeps them in check. If the veil is not worn, they would not be able to control their sexual desires. I think this is bull. Men are not wild animals that run around uncontrolled when they see the beautiful hair of a woman draped over her shoulders. We have transcended that base behavior, well, at least most of us have. I couldn't help but wonder what the black hijab was hiding. It was so neatly and tightly wrapped around the mass of her hair, like the white fabric in the artist Christo and Jean Claude's work titled Wrapped Rice Stag. We climbed the last few feet of the red rock and reached the base of the lighthouse. The lighthouse formation is 300 feet tall and about 10 feet in diameter. It has a thick red base and a grayish-red tower stacked on top. The base is composed of thin vermilion clay layers stacked and etched away into a cylindrical shape dating back to the Permian Age, occasionally including a vein of white gypsum. The tower is made from harder sandstone dating back to the Triassic Age. The rock composing the lighthouse is more resistant to erosion than the surrounding rock, which in turn allowed erosion to sculpt it into its shape. Behind the lighthouse, there is flat ground that connects it to a small hill of similar height. From a side view, the hill and the lighthouse form a U-shaped gap in between. This gap creates a very strong wind current through it, so strong that you could have faith in it would not let you down in a trust fall. Even so, over the millions of years of roaring, the wind was not able to completely erode the lighthouse from existence. Just as the freedoms and liberties of the Western world were not able to topple or shift Ranim's beliefs, her hijab served as testament. It did not budge or come undone despite the overwhelming power of the wind. She did not try to cross the eroded gap, for she would have probably been blown away herself. Yet, I still wish the wind would become stronger, even if there was nothing left, as long as I could see her hair. Was it curiosity or desire that had me cheering on the wind? If the wind did manage to blow her veil away, would her faith go along with it? Or would shining myriads of gold and silver fall to the red rock and make us all rich?
Get up on the mic here. Why don't we have these in our classroom? Really help with the open door issue. I just reviewed the introduction rubric before I got in here. So my name is Will Felty. I am a junior English literature major here at Tech. And Lubbock, Texas is my home. I was born at Covenant and I never really left. So I'm going to read for you today this sort of reflective, free, associative essay. I wrote it for Dr. Caswell's travel writing course, but I cheated because I just wrote about home. So this is called Ghost. I dropped her off at her place on the corner of the roundabout. She inched toward the passenger seat door and didn't look at me when she said she'd probably see me tomorrow. I really hoped that was just because she was shy. She seemed that way. I watched her walk up the steps to her door and disappear inside. Then I drove a couple blocks down and stepped out of my car to have a cigarette. It had been a warm, sunny day, but a bitterly cold wind had started blowing through in the evening, and the temperature was rapidly dipping below freezing. This was how springtime always was in Lubbock, Texas, and every year I had to pretend to be surprised by it. I've lived in this town in the exact same house for 21 years now, and in that time I've come to love it and hate it and love it and hate it and love it again. I lit up a smoke and started walking down the alley, but I faltered. A lot of people's lights were still on. It felt much later than 10:53 p.m. on a Friday night, but that's exactly when it was. I wanted to look up at the houses and peer over the fences and glance into the windows, but I didn't want to creep anybody out. Creep anyone out. That's my least favorite part of not being a kid anymore, of being something resembling a man, and a giant one at that. I can't seem to go anywhere without creeping someone out. I felt that once in New York, sitting on a park bench watching the children and their families. I was just trying to kill some time before I had to go to LaGuardia. So I didn't walk down the alley at 10:53 p.m. on a Friday night. I turned around and just walked in circles between the two blocks that bookended the main street. This part of town is called South Overton. The year I was born, it entered the National Register of Historic Places. The architecture here is very beautiful, to me at least. The neighborhood was founded in 1907 by Dr. M.C. Overton. That same year, he performed an emergency appendectomy. It was the first ever major operation performed in Lubbock. There's a town just southeast of here called Post. My friend Ronnie is from there. The same year that the Overton district was founded, the town of Post was founded by and named for Charles William Post of Post Foods, the famous breakfast cereal manufacturer. He'd moved out to Texas in the late 1880s after having a mental breakdown. He started out patenting and manufacturing farm implements, but I guess that just ended up being too much for him. So he came down here, got involved in real estate in Fort Worth, and bought a patch of land in West Texas where he thought he'd build his utopia. He made sure there wasn't any booze to be had there and plenty of churches to go around. Toward the end, he'd detonate explosives in the sky thinking he'd be able to summon rain. It didn't work. He shot himself in 1914. A couple years ago, this guy from around here wrote a couple books about ghost sightings in the Lubbock area. His name is Daryl Maloney. He wrote one entry on a house just 2 blocks east of my childhood home. He gave the account of a guy named Michael who grew up there, probably in the 70s or 80s. Michael said that throughout his childhood, there were a number of bizarre occurrences that took place in that house. The radio and the furniture and the family photographs would be tampered with by unseen hands. His little brother used to destroy the paper dolls their mother would make for them. When asked why, he replied, "He told me to," and pointed into thin air. They have an old photograph of the living room where there is what appears to be the apparition of a boy inside a turned-off TV. And when Michael was about 10, they found an old car buried in the yard. They couldn't dig it up without threatening the foundation. Michael says that C.W. Post used to own that land, and before the neighborhood was built in the 1950s, Post had a ranch house and a barn in the place where Michael's house would eventually stand. Folks used to say that Old Man Post would conduct occult rituals there, but he's been dead for over a century, and that might be bullshit. Daryl never mentions Post by his name in the book. He just slyly alludes to his tremendous standing in real estate, the fact that he founded a town around here and gave it his name, and that he killed himself in 1914. It only takes about 10 minutes of looking at a map and searching names on Google to figure out just who he meant. But folks around here already know Charles William Post as that crazy old rich guy who made cereal and thought he could build a perfect city and control the weather. I've never understood why someone wouldn't believe in ghosts. The reality seems like the most natural thing in the world to me. I've always believed in ghosts, in Satan, and the presence of pure, unadulterated evil in the world, even when I wasn't always sure I believed in God. It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really felt I ran into one in my friend's kitchen. She was moving out because she kept hearing noises and voices when she would try to sleep. She was in the living room with her friends, sipping wine and planning how to get her stuff out of there when I wandered off and looked at the spot where she said she always felt a presence. It was right in front of the fridge, which was adjacent to the window looking out into the backyard. I guess what led me to step right into it could only be described as morbid curiosity. On command, I felt what seemed like a gust of air rising from the ground and passing through my body. And there was a sadness, a dreadful, heavy sadness that I've only felt once before. I think I was 13 years old. One of the varsity basketball players at my sister's high school hanged himself in his backyard. The next day, the school held some kind of impromptu vigil in the gym. I didn't know the guy, but when I walked through the doors of the gym, that same heavy sadness sucked the wind right out of me like a punch to the gut. I still remember Coach Ammons, who taught me Texas history that year, looking down at his shoes trying to think of what to say. That's what I felt right there in front of the fridge, condensed into an instant and localized over 1 square foot of land. I was reeling from that for a long time, but the presence didn't stick around. It left promptly, almost like it was skittish. This was the same presence that was rattling the wine glasses in my friend's kitchen, that was bending over her bed late in the night and whispering in her ear, "Am I scaring you?" The same one that her friend saw pacing around in the kitchen while he tried to sleep on the couch. And when I walked up to it, it scrammed. I'm not sure what that means. My friend doesn't live there anymore. She got out of there and I'm glad. I walk by that house often now. The one down the street from my childhood home, too. I peer over the fences and glance into the windows as if to look into the face of whatever might be in there and say, I'm not scared of you, even though I am. I find myself wandering down to the park a couple blocks down from my friend's place. I knew a guy in high school who was a little older. His name was Jose. He used to speak to the students about Jesus, and he'd be so earnest and kind and animated. I liked him a lot. He got shot to death in this park last year. He just had a kid. I walk around this park late at night sometimes when I've had a little to drink or I just feel like I need to walk. I look up at the sky and I want to scream at something. I'm not sure what. Satan, I guess. But I don't want to disturb the peace or provoke something I don't want to provoke. So I walk around in silence, aimlessly. And if anyone's awake and looking out their window when I do, I'm sure they're wondering who I am and what I'm doing and if I'm really even there. Does that make me a ghost?
So we have some time for questions.
I have a question for our chemical engineer. What was your experience writing that story as somebody who's coming from your background with chemical engineering?
I wrote it for the class Professor Caswell teaches, but we were just wanting to go on a weekend trip to Palo Duro, and my group of friends were very varied, I guess. I don't know. I have friends from Iran, Kuwait, and Lebanon, and so I thought it was an interesting thing I was thinking, because the wind was blowing really hard. It really was. But it just wouldn't come off. I don't know why, but yeah.
I have another question for you. As you were reading that, I was thinking about some travel logs that I've read of explorers around the West, and just the kind of detail and the kind of tone that was in yours is very much like that. And I was wondering, who are you reading, or maybe who were you reading in Professor Caswell's class that led you to kind of observe and relay that information in such a way?
Yeah, so I read a lot of geological surveys because I really did not know what any of the rock were, but I read that, and then I guess the author I've been really binging is Annie Dillard, so I got inspiration from her a lot.
I have a question. So your poem was titled after Sylvia Plath, and it's like, I've had to kill you, right? And I think her poem continues with, I've had to kill you so many times, I think. Am I remembering that right? And so I was wondering if your leaving that off was deliberate, because it seemed to come back with the ending where you ended on finding a way to not have to kill it, right? To not have to kill it. So
I'm trying to look at my own poem.
yeah, I was wondering if that was how deliberate that was, to cut off the so many times and have it be like intentionally once, and then your poem denying the so many times, and that you're also stopping that killing.
Right. Yeah, I kind of intended it to just be that once, and plus when I was reading that poem this morning, that's when I renamed it. That's where the stanza, or not the stanza, that's where the line ends. So I just was like, that seems like a natural ending point for that.